Loyalty is an interesting concept, and in recent years across the West, that question has quietly crept back into the national conversation. With the influx of different peoples, religions, and cultures, many have started to wonder, where does everyone's loyalty really lie? And frankly, they are right to be concerned. During the Spanish Civil War, as General Franco's forces closed in on Madrid, he spoke of 4 military columns marching on the city. But then he mentioned a 5th, already inside the walls. Citizens whose loyalty was with the enemy, people you assumed were on your side. That's where the term 5th column comes from. A threat from within, not from outside. As an ex-Muslim living in Australia, I've seen something disturbingly similar unfold across the West. Some of the protests, the growing climate of intimidation, the way politicians stay silent, and the fear people feel when they dare to speak the truth. From the Danish cartoons to South Park to Charlie Hebdo, to the grooming gang scandals in the UK, and now the quiet passing of blasphemy laws all over the West, it's clear that elements of a 5th column are beginning to take root in many Western societies. And it's time we talked about it. I've spoken about the failures of multiculturalism in the West many times on this channel, and a lot of it can be attributed to leaders across the political spectrum for multiple reasons, including believing that all cultures are equal. But in a Western liberal democracy, it's a certain set of values that keep society functioning as one with high trust, where ideals like freedom of thought, religion, and even ideas like equal opportunities for women and LGBT people exist. Unfortunately, all of that faces significant risk, despite the facade that politicians paint all over the West. However, that has slowly changed. I believe the facade truly fell in October 2023 after the events in Israel, before any sort of retaliation by the Israelis. Surprisingly, the facade didn't collapse anywhere near the Middle East. It happened right here on our own doorstep. In my case, it happened in Sydney. A crowd gathered at the steps of the Opera House, waving flags, chanting slogans, and shouting words that quickly echoed around the world. Not words directed at the Israeli government, but towards fellow Australians, people of a different religious and ethnic background. And once you turned on the TV, you realised this was happening all across the West, from England to the US, from Canada to France. A growing number of people, both on social media and in the streets of great Western cities, were openly identifying with atrocities of a foreign terror group, while threatening their own neighbours. You'd think that in the 2020s, after the Me Too movement, after 2 decades of anti-war sentiment, after what were supposedly successful multicultural experiments, this would be unthinkable. But it wasn't. Not only did it happen, it was amplified. And for the first time, the average citizen saw just how large these groups had become. Now, maybe this is all just a coincidence. Maybe the reason crowds across Western cities took to the streets, waving the same flags as a foreign terror group, had nothing to do with loyalty. Maybe it's just passionate political engagement, or maybe something's shifted. Of course, it's not all Muslim. In fact, many are secularized and probably will end up leaving the religion and adopt values more aligned with the West. However, it is undeniable that the religion radicalizes people in a very significant way. In cities like London, Brussels, and Sydney, such communities have been quietly growing over the past few decades. In terms of population, in 1990, there were barely a blip on Europe's demographic radar. By 2020, over 50 million across the continent. That's around 6% of the entire population. Imagine even 10% of that being radicalized. Or how about 1%? None of that equals good news for the general public. And with numbers like that also comes influence. Electoral maps have started to shift, politicians have begun to take notice. And just like that, we started to see a new kind of lobby, one that doesn't care much for Western values, but has plenty to say about foreign wars, religious sensitivities, and why free speech should come with a filter.
Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religion?
In fact, it even impacts how security forces work within these countries. In the UK, there are now 18 members of parliament from this background. In the US, it's the same. In Australia and across Europe, Let's just say entire political parties now treat certain districts like they're running for office in another country entirely. Is this just representation? I highly doubt it. It's one thing to bring your culture, but even that already has difficulties blending into Western values. It's another to bring your foreign policy based around religious ideas and sectarianism and expect everyone else to adjust. Now, some might say, you're reading too much into it. Just because a group grows in number doesn't mean they are a threat. Sure, like I said, not all, but the data paints a rather painful picture. Now, before we go into the data, if you're enjoying this video so far, please hit that subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up. Since 2001, Western countries have seen a long list of attacks, not from invading armies, but from people born and raised here or those who immigrated, people who went to local schools and still chose to turn on the societies that raised them. Madrid, London, Brussels, Berlin, Manchester, New York. The list goes on. And in just the UK, nearly 40 major plots have been foiled in the last few years alone. But it's not just the attacks, it's what they're often about. In 2015, Charlie Hebdo was attacked for publishing cartoons. A few years later, a teacher in France showed the same cartoons in a classroom in a discussion on free speech. That was enough to get him targeted, and let's just say, dealt with in the most brutal way imaginable. Even in New York in 2022, Salman Rushdie, who had lived under threats for decades, was attacked while giving a lecture. And what was the crime? Offending the wrong people, drawing the wrong thing, saying what you're not supposed to say. Now, in a normal Western society, you can mock Christianity, paint offensive images of Jesus, or turn a crucifix into performance art, and no one bats an eye. Because a key tenet of Western liberal democracies is the freedom of thought, the freedom of religion, and also the freedom to criticize. Those who are loyal to these Western ideals abide by them. But now, religious ideas override them. We like to say we no longer have blasphemy laws, but not only are they coming back in countries like the UK and Australia, we have replaced them with something much more effective. Fear. Fear that stops cartoonists from drawing, fear that silences teachers, fear that makes even platforms like this one walk on eggshells. So is this what loyalty to Western ideals looks like? And here's where it gets really strange. Because if everything I've said so far was just isolated, overblown, or unrelated to anything larger, why does the modern Western society look like it's prepping for war? You've probably seen them. Bollards, steel barricades, concrete blocks outside train stations, shopping centres, and Christmas markets. They're not art installations. They're not here for traffic flow. They exist for one reason: to stop vehicles from being turned into weapons. Then there are the armed patrols outside synagogues and embassies, the surveillance networks, the watch lists, the de-radicalization programs aimed almost entirely at one religion. In the UK, 75% of MI5's counter-terror operations focus on that one threat. France has military soldiers outside Jewish schools. Germany now designs public spaces with anti-ramming infrastructure by default. But here's a question. Do loyal citizens require this kind of containment? Because last I checked, loyalty to Western ideals usually involves a bit less bloodlust, especially if it's usually targeted at your own countrymen. And none of this was normal 30 years ago. Across Western Europe, this integration experiment has been going on for decades. And yet, survey after survey reveals a stubborn little truth. The values just aren't sinking. In the UK, over a quarter of this community believes Sharia law should eventually replace British law. In France and Germany, support for religious law in civil matters ranges between 20% and 30%, depending on the group and region. And in one UK poll, more than half of respondents from this background said homosexuality should be illegal. Illegal. In Australia, these areas notoriously voted against legalising gay marriage during the national referendum. Once again, the loyalty is with beliefs and cultures from foreign lands, not with the country where they lived. And once again, the victims are those who don't share the same beliefs. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. It seems second-generation citizens born and raised in Western countries end up even more radical, more isolated, and more hostile to the values they've grown up around. So what exactly went wrong? Was it the fault of these countries in assimilating them? or their refusal to be assimilated. Let's take a step back. This isn't the first time the West has welcomed people from vastly different backgrounds, different cultures, different faiths, different traditions. And most of the time, those people come here, adapt to the laws, live peacefully, contribute quietly, and don't demand the country rewrite its values to accommodate them. They don't riot over jokes. They don't march by the tens of thousands because of a foreign conflict. They don't demand that criticism of their beliefs be treated as hate speech. And they certainly don't celebrate violence committed on the other side of the world while threatening people on this side of the street. So why is it that only one group seems to bring this chaos with it? Why is it that only one set of beliefs turns free speech into a national security risk? Why is it that the rest integrate and this one isolates, agitates, and radicalizes, even into the second generation? No one's saying integration is easy, but once again, the concept of loyalty gets questioned. And now that you're here, based on everything I've presented to you so far, ask yourself, does a fifth column exist in the West? Let me know your answer in the comments below. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give it a thumbs up. A massive thank you to my channel members and Patreon supporters. You are the backbone of this work. Want to join the crew? Hit the join button below or swing by Patreon. I'd love to have you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.